Let's discuss here 7 common programming mistakes that every beginner must avoid. Word counting starts from 0 to 1 if you're not in programming, and if you'll be pointing this a mistake made by a programmer. Mistakes are a part of coding, and every programmer makes tons of mistakes, especially as a beginner, but that's how they grow and become a good developer. And we are going to discuss some very common mistakes that every programmer makes during the initial phase of coding, but these are not limited. And it's good to be aware of these mistakes and how to avoid them to excel your future. Number 1 is learning too many programming languages, frameworks, and technology. This is one of the most common mistakes that most of beginners make when they start learning to code. They think that it's impressive to have Java, C++, Python, and a lot of other coding languages, frameworks, or technology to showcase to someone or to mention in the resume, but that's actually not often the case. And it's a sign of non-intelligence. If you don't have command or in-depth knowledge in any one of them, learning Java for 15 days and switching to Python just because Java is tough or there's another reason, then you will eventually end up with lots of confusion. It's good to have knowledge of multiple languages, but we highly recommend just to focus on a single language in the beginning, and once you're experienced, you will not face difficulty in switching to another language. If you do this mistake, then after a couple of years, you'll realize you are not a master in any single language. Number 2 is comparison, self-doubt, and fear. It is human nature to compare ourselves with others all the time. That's the case in programming as well. You see a talented programmer who is good at solving problems and making things work too fast. You start doubting and questioning your capability, which is not good. Some people are good at picking up the concept very quickly, and some people take time, but slow learning is completely okay if you take interest in coding. Programming might be scary for you sometimes, and beginners go through the phase when a voice in the head always says, I'm not smart enough to solve the problem, I have the wrong type of brain, and a lot of things make them feel insecure and make them realize they are not capable enough to code. When you have self-doubt on yourself, always remember that you need to face it with courage and you need to be fearless. Programming is a field of taking the challenge and helping others by solving their problems. But before that, do yourself a favor and help yourself first. Ask yourself, what can I do to become a better programmer, and what are the areas I should improve on? Identify your strengths, be thankful for it, and identify your weaknesses, and work on that by taking help from others, watching tutorials, or joining other community groups. Number 3 is writing messy code and ignoring code quality. An experienced programmer can easily spot a beginner looking at their code format. Some of the mistakes that beginners make in formatting code are as such: no proper indentation in code, inconsistent use of new lines in white space or putting everything in a single line, writing function that is too big or putting everything in a single line, function or file, bad variables and function names, example name of variable or function. They use small case and large case variable or names randomly, and not commenting or over commenting the code. The above points are not limited, and there are a lot of other mistakes that beginners make while writing the code. As a beginner, it's good and exciting that your code is running and giving the desired output, but what if you hand over this messy code to someone else and he or she needs to maintain or continue it? It will become annoying for that person, and he or she will face difficulty in understanding your code, loops, or conditionals in it. Programming is not just about writing code and making it work. Your code should be clean, readable, maintainable as well, so always try to write well-structured code. The next is writing code without a plan. A lot of beginners in excitement skip the thinking, research, and planning stages of a project and start writing code right away. They do not understand the problem, requirements, limitations, and do not think about all the case scenarios. What's the input and what should be the output, etc. It can create it can create a big issue and later you may regret it. We highly recommend every beginner that just like before saying anything to someone, it can create a big issue and later you may regret it. We highly recommend every beginner that just like before saying anything to anyone, you should think so you don't regret it later. You should also think and research before you start writing code. In programming, developers spend only 10% of the time writing code. The rest of the time they think, plan, research, and discuss the complete project. A beginner should go with the flow in a sequence of think, research, plan, write, validate, and modify. So they should validate some basic things before writing the code to avoid any issue or disaster at the production level. And understand things such as the problem requirements, limitation, do some research and experiment, design the program and make a rough working draft, pick up the right data structure for your project, think and take note of all the core cases for testing, and break the problems into solvable pieces. The next is thinking you know it all. It's really an exciting and amazing feeling for beginners when their code starts running without any bug. After all, they put so much effort into learning to code and finally they have successfully written a program that actually works. You enjoy coding, your confidence grows, and maybe you also start teaching stuff to others. It's actually pleasurable knowing that you have learned a lot of stuff, but what if we say to explore some more complex projects made by top-notch programmers on GitHub, or just take a look at your own code you have written a couple months back. You'll understand that it will still need modifications and your code may be refactored as well. This happens with experienced programmers as well. Always remember, programming is a marathon where there's no end line. Every day is new technology, framework, and a lot of things are coming out in the world, so there's no end of learning in the coding area. The next is no backup for work. This is one of the blunder mistakes a new programmer can make, especially as a beginner. Think about a situation when you have put so much effort in making a project and after 2 weeks you find that the disk crashed in your system and where all your files are saved. You also have lost all your work. In development, there is no one who is going to listen when you have lost X amount of work just because your system or a part of the system got crashed. You cannot have an excuse in this case, and that's the reason every beginner or programmer should have this habit to keep backup other work at regular intervals and learn to use source controls as well. And the next is laziness and doing practice. There is no point to read thousands of lines of code if you cannot get your hands dirty in programming. There is huge difference between reading the coding stuff theoretically and doing things practically. Practicing the actual code should never be neglected in programming, and it's easy to read some lines of code or watch some videos for learning, then telling your brain that you understand everything, but once you will start learning the code, you'll find that you're making a lot of silly mistakes. In the beginning, you'll be missing semicolon braces and you'll find difficulty in writing a loop as well. But to get rid of all these things, you just need to do it and try your hands on code. Keep practicing it, catching some errors and debugging these errors, and then finding out how all the small pieces come together.